Welcome, everyone. My name is Rosa Weinberg. I'm a designer, maker, K-12 educator, and the K-12 Design Education Lead for MIT's Morningside Academy for Design, which we call MAD. This year, MAD explores a new format for its annual Power of Design. Our keynote event tonight with Jessica Banks, 4 hands-on workshops, a panel, and a number of short talks, all offered free and open to the public as part of the Cambridge Science Festival. Each event will explore the power of design to transform learning across different themes, objectives, and age groups. We have collaboratively designed activities to ignite curiosity, encourage experimentation, nurture creativity, and highlight transferable skills. We will be exploring several learning objectives that we hope will serve participants beyond their experience this week. How do you research a topic and use good questions to enhance your design process? How do you employ testing and iteration to refine and redirect your project? And how to utilize low-fidelity prototyping to explore design solutions beyond your initial assumptions. We are working towards creating free online resources, which we hope will serve students, teachers, and educators beyond MIT. Stay tuned on design.mit.edu to access these resources in the coming months. Tomorrow, September 26th, from 4 to 6, we have Level Up Game Design at the Raygon Institute. We will be exploring how and why game designers and producers use identity and community to drive the popularity of contemporary games, with an exciting panel followed by a hands-on workshop. For this event, we are welcoming high school students and all others who want to join. On Friday, September 27th, from 10 to 1, we have Planetary Play, also at the Raygon Institute. This is a series of short talks and workshops on design for outer space, which will cover important design learning skills like research and interviews, low-fidelity prototyping, and ideation. On Saturday, September 28th, from 10 to 11:30, we have Fashionino in the Stata Center in collaboration with Mini. Children in grades K to 2 will be taken through the entire design process to create a fashion wearable inspired by science fiction. We're also going to have a mini fashion show at the end. Lastly, on Sunday, September 29th, from 12 to 4, we have Pencil Critters at the Cambridge Science Festival Carnival. Families will work alongside MIT staff and students to create fun creatures for the carnival and learn about experimentation and low-fidelity prototyping. We encourage everyone to join us that day. We want to acknowledge the MIT Museum and Cambridge Science Festival for being wonderful partners. We love being part of such a multifaceted, multicultural, and accessible, interactive, and fun celebration of learning. There are many more events beyond MADS that sound really exciting. There were so many people who helped make these events possible. A special shout out to Keelan, Oscar, and Brooke at the MIT Museum, Scott and Sarah at the MIT Ed Arcade and Game Lab, Michael and Donna from Innovators for Purpose, Nebus and Daniel, 2 undergraduates who are working with me this term, Rachel of WPS, Cody of the Space Exploration Initiative, Mateo, Naya, and Ganit, and lastly, Kelly, Alyssa, and Ruth of Mini. Now, please join me in welcoming MAD founding director, John Oh.
Thank you, Rosa. Thank you so much, Rosa, and thanks everyone for coming tonight. We're really excited about the program, and all of this came out of Rosa's big brain for what we should do with Cambridge Science Festival. So we're absolutely delighted with this lineup. And I also want to say a big thank you to the whole MAD team. So looking around the room, we have Skylar, Maria, Roy, Jen, Marion, Adelaide. So everybody's helped out to make all this possible. And we're just really looking forward to a great few days ahead. And fundamentally, like our friend Mitch Resnick, who's the Lego professor of lifelong kindergarten, we think learning should look a lot more like kindergarten, a lot more like play, creativity, open-ended problems. And so we are absolutely delighted to open this year's MAD at the Cambridge Science Festival with a love letter to the Unmade with Jessica Banks. And so many of you, of course, know her work. She's an inventor, a designer. She's a roboticist, an engineer. She's a creative writer. She has founded Rock Paper Robot, a kinetic furniture company. You also know her as the engineering lead co-host on Netflix Emmy Award-winning home renovation series, Hack My Home. You definitely saw that Emmy coming, I'm sure. And we're just really excited to hear and learn from you. And fundamentally, I think you're going to help us think outside of the box, help us elevate creativity across MIT. And we love that you also earned a degree at MIT. She is the kind of risk taker who, when she decides to turn her career toward robots, she applies to one graduate program with Rod Brooks here at MIT, thinking, well, we'll see what happens. Fast, cheap, and out of control. And I've already learned a lot from you, Jessica. One thing I've learned is MIT needs a lot more colorful jumpsuits around campus. So please join me in welcoming Jessica Banks back to MIT.
Thank you for having me. Okay, did we sound check? We're going to take that away. We're out of prop. We've been at this for some time now. I know it hasn't always been easy, which is by no means an implication of your investment, but of the evolution of mine. I don't remember when I first noticed you, but I remember times during my childhood when I looked for you. Now, I realize this transition was a very notable inflection point in our relationship, in any relationship probably. And this is really the whole point of this letter, because what I'm referring to is the effort of curiosity. Thankfully, I didn't start from zero. Humans are soft-wired to ping the world because otherwise you, the unmade, the pantheon of unresolved ideas would be invisible to us. Our curiosity evolved as a survival mechanism over the yawn of millions of years. During the sneeze of modern society, curiosity has transcended the immediacy of survival and has become the foundation of human progress, driving innovations that shape every aspect of contemporary life, fueling intellectual expansion, creative expression, and a collective quest to solve problems and explore far beyond our immediate needs. So why is it that the impulse for considering the unmade wanes for so many adults? Maybe some quagmire of fear and overstimulation, maybe because we take it for granted as a foregone innate ability and not a skill that requires practice. Forgive my digression. I hope you'll see how thankful I am for you, for the opportunity to reify my ideas and submit them to reality. I carry every single one of the gifts you have ever given me in the crowded, yet infinite potential well of my mind, in dog-eared pages of notebooks, in the feeling of a tool in my palm, and in my insatiable need to extract bearings from anything that spins. To this end, I continue to tune my curiosity, the flexible lens through which I perceive you, so that I may see you fully. My youthful gaze matured into what you could call a steadfast pursuit of you, from beaches filled with rocks that I could stack into spaceships, to labs and machine shops filled with parts that I could build into robots. And always, you skipped ahead of me. Over time, I learned that you have no intention of evading me. but instead that you lead me. There was a time I even thought you were a reflection of my inabilities. Those were the times that fear of failure, of imperfection, of uncertainty, of ugliness usurped my curiosity and distorted my view of you. Like when I entered the humanoid robotics group at CSAIL for grad school. I didn't even know what an operating system was, let alone a humanoid. It hurt to follow that very steep learning curve. I followed you. The experience of having one's fully formed adult ego absolutely obliterated is a profoundly painful experience. And yet, 5 stars. Talk about a rebirth of wonder and a reduction to being a thing that is wholly curious, a relationship with my hands. As I learned to machine metal and route electrons, I felt a new proximity to you. It took some time, but I realized my curiosity was a skill and that I could choose it over fear. This was more evidence, actually, of how meta building humanoid robots is, by the way, which it's much less about building smart robots than it is about finding out how humans are smart. I forgot I added these slides last minute. It occurs to me that sometimes I might seem obsessed with you, especially since Rock Paper Robot, the kinetic furniture company that I started after school, is basically a revenue-dependent homage to you. We'll laugh about it someday. Here's my studio. Looks a lot like things we might have here, labs and boxes of things. There's a box that says baby heads, actually.
In some way, actually, this feels a little bit like my brain. It's maybe overwhelming. A lot of Legos.
Like, remember that time when you gave me that idea for a levitating table? A block of blocks, you said, before going back to your book on fitted sheets. Well, 6 months later, I made our signature product. We call it Float. It's a matrix of magnetized wooden cubes held in equilibrium by a system of flexible steel cables. By varying the magnetic strength, we can control how rigid the table is and how it responds to what you put on top of it, different objects. It's like a big wooden Jell-O cube. So the cool thing here is that if you distribute the mass of something over many of the cubes, then it can hold up a lot of things. And if you just put it on one, it slumps down. I wanted to make this table that was like, not another coffee table book, kind of responds to you like this. Of course, wood can't really be magnetized, so all the cubes are actually hollow, and we embed repelling magnets inside each of every adjacent face. You can, if you look closely, you can see these little tethers that are holding everything together. So those tethers are actually holding the table both together and apart. The angles are important because the magnets that are inside are circles, and so if they move more than half of their diameter relative to one another, they'll start to connect on the surface, on the sides, because of the magnetic field. So we have to keep them from ever doing that. So they're trying to repel, we hold them together, but we also, because of the angles, need to make sure that they stay apart. A funny thing happened when we first made this table, actually, which was a friend came and saw it, and he's like, you should have used magnets. And I was like, oh my gosh, I paid so much for that wizard from Craigslist. Never again. We even made shelves to go with the tables. They levitate out from the wall, which is even more counterintuitive to me. After doing the math, I still didn't believe it was going to work. It does. And the back shelf, the back cubes are actually attached to the wall, and so the front ones are levitating outward. Or remember that concrete diamond that you gave me? Now it's a table called Bragg. It's made of 41 pieces of corian suspended from an internal structure. Your gift, the concrete version that I didn't make, is still in my notebook. And then this was a good one. A robotic chandelier that opens and closes in response to ambient sound. I named it Gleam for now, but it's one of hundreds that will exist. The whole goal was that we wanted to have these shadows change on the ceiling. Of course, then we installed it in a place that had only a slice of a ceiling. I'm very bad at documenting things. Oh, and then of course, yes, the Ollie table gift. A wall-mounted table that extends out to variable lengths from a small desk to a banquet table without any rails or visible mounting system on the wall. If we had put the mounting system on, we would probably be in production, but that wasn't our jam. So we wanted it to seem like it was just coming down and no one knew how. Each of the slats could be swapped out for customization too. So the surface can display art or ads or a whiteboard or be printed to camouflage into wallpaper or brick, whatever you have on the wall. I barely had a minute to breathe when right after we made that table, a friend came by and asked, what happens to the chairs when the table goes up on the wall? Honestly, I was ready to call it a standing table and call it a day until you showed up. 2 months later, and the Ollie chair was born. An ergonomic shape-shifting seat that unfurls in a second and retracts to under 2 inches with a simple pull of a string. Really, this was a moment for me where it was a very important transition because I realized that I needed to start thinking in a systems engineering way more because I built this table and I didn't consider the chairs that went with it, and I made a mistake. And it then led me to understand how to design in the future from a bigger perspective. The timbre seat can also be customized here for art, for wall storage. Oops. A eureka to me was that I do not destroy you when I complete a product, as a thought transmutes from unmade to made, from concept to creation. You are always one step ahead. This is valuable because if I perceive you in motion, then I stay in motion. The creative momentum affords me a well-designed life that frees me from the burden of coveting my inventions and staunching my curiosity. And I want to talk about this later. I know I'm not special to you, by the way. There are many others in your orbit. In fact, there is an entire genre of TV shows that cater to the experience of watching your potential get resolved. Last year was the launch of a Netflix show called Hack My Home. By the way, this is a funny thing, which was that this picture never actually was taken. And I didn't realize that until the show was getting launched and we saw this, and I realized that we had never ever been in the same room like that together. And but you know, there were like about a week there when I actually thought, oh yeah, that picture, and then I was like, that picture? Okay. Of note, I am the engineering co-host, not the design co-host in the show. As an engineer, if there's a problem, we always search for the solution. Just have to keep trying and trying until you find it. A food prep / table in the downstairs kitchenette.
Whoa.
Okay.
Okay, tell me how this works.
Okay, so we create this prep area plus a table.
When Janae wants to make dinner,
Okay.
she can fold this out and prep here on this surface, and then they can have dinner here. And when it folds back up, it's basically concealed into totally integrated open shelving. Imagine the table could come up and down, right? You're
now
Love the
you're
Legos.
going somewhere.
Now
That's
you're
cool.
eating, you're working. We bring it down so that we can bring out bedding for another 2 people. So we already talked about how I want a storage solution that comes down from above. And this is how it'll work. We hack a lift system in the center of the kitchen that basically goes up flush into a hollow soffit in the ceiling. Then, with the press of a button, the whole thing can lower so that they can access all of their small appliances. Press a button again, whoop, rises up flush to the ceiling.
This is a really, really smart hack, Jess.
Cool.
Yeah, I like
Thank
it a
you.
lot.
Thank you. I'm bolting the chassis for the storage lift cables. This is the last one, and then we'll be able to test it.
It sounds like it's locking to me.
All right, now that the bolts are secure, let's test it. Okay. You ready? Okay.
Oh, wow. Now that is cool.
To be clear, I didn't make a montage of my best moments. Okay, they did that for me, so that would be just weird. Okay, so when I signed up for the show, I knew I would be seeing you all the time, looking at problems, brainstorming, everything. Even though about 80% of that was edited out, we got to be on screen together. Look at us. So actually this, I'll give you a little setup. This is a design for a family that homeschooled. Actually this design was for a closet for these amazing girls they had 4 girls living in the space and they all needed to put their stuff in the closet. They only had one, so we were developing an entirely new closet for them. The house was crazy. The acoustics in the house, it was a dome. It was built from a kit. And the acoustics in the house were so weird that you could hear someone downstairs in the kitchen like they were next to you on your shoulder. It was really rough to be mic'd all the time there, actually. So this next part is about brainstorming. The format of the show was we got a problem, we saw a family's issues in their home, and then we would brainstorm about it as a group, and then go and split up and try to fix the problems. So a lot of that was focused on the brainstorming. Oops, is it playing? Nope, I need to pause it, I can't. Okay, this was a family that homeschooled. So they taught all of their kids in their living room. It was completely overcrowded with schooling, and they were expecting to adopt another child. Okay, so we were trying to solve for homeschooling. We were trying to bring someone else in, and the house was already very small. And that's what we're talking about. So that was the brainstorming sessions we had. I will answer any question that you have about the show, by the way, afterwards. It was, the downstairs was a really, really cool project, and we really had no clue how to fix this situation. But here are some ways that the brainstorming happened. They really loved the 3D printing. They were like, how can we get in there? Can we run it with the camera inside of it? Can we, it was a really interesting part of the show because they were not so embedded in the technical sides of things. But now let's see how we finish that problem. Here's the thing. There was so much of the show that happened where we got to do brainstorming and experimentation. But really, these shows are built about the ends and the big reveals, right? And I see why it makes sense. I think that maybe there's a little issue with American media and that we don't get to see more of the process and more of the journey. And if I did another show like this, I would definitely want to focus on doing something like that. But the reveals are pretty special, and they do make people very happy. So the reveals are special. But today, now, I'm off screen, and actually on this stage because of you, the Unmade, hopefully communicating my gratitude, not by way of triumphs of completion or the great reveals, but because my curiosity is a testament that you will lead me anywhere. P.S. It would be great if you could just not text me between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. I could use the sleep. The end.
Awesome. We have time for questions. I think we do have microphones if you have a question. If you could please raise your hand or come to a mic. There's one over here.
You can ask anything.
Hello? Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Anna. I'm an undergrad studying MedE. I'm curious, after you built them like a device, what about maintenance? Like if something breaks, do they call you?
Have you been on Reddit? We get that question a lot. Actually, I stopped looking. So they don't call me. They call the production team. Usually we give them like a maintenance thing. So some of the big questions, we installed, actually there's a company started here at MIT, Ori, and we installed some very big robotic bed systems that raise and lower. And you can imagine that they're just like washing machines. You know, you have a maintenance agreement and then you can call in and get help. We also made sure, and this is something that I actually did along with, we had a fabulous fabrication team and build team that built a lot of this. They also came up with a lot of this. But we went and we would check for safety, like pinch hazards and things like that. After a while, if it gets too long, you know, I mean, 5 years out, maybe, I don't know. Like, great question, you know. Some of the other automated systems that we have also have built-in warranties. So, you know, there are actuators and things that can be replaced. But it's a good question. And I don't think that the shows have completely worked that out just as a genre yet. Our show is one of the more technically oriented reality, you know, transformation shows. So it's a good question.
You can go. Hi, my name is Fabian. I'm a second-year Mass College of Pharmacy student. I had a quick question kind of going off the maintenance of that. Mm-hmm. Where do you get your ideas from? Is this something that's innovative from passion or just general curiosity?
I'm so glad that you asked that. This answer feels very important, actually. I would have to say that first, I don't know, okay? And second, that I think a lot of people will talk about like that a creative life or a life well lived is one with passion, okay? And I totally disagree. I think that passion is completely fetishized by society. You're lucky if you have it, right? Like if you can find that blazing torch of momentum, that thing that drives you in life, more power to you. But it's hard to have that, and it's hard to maintain that. So I think that if you can instead focus on choosing curiosity, and what my big point here is that if you can curate and hone and practice curiosity in your life, always choose curiosity over fear at every turn, and you'll become more aware of it as you get better, as you practice. You'll understand those moments where you hesitate and then you're like, nope, I can find out. I'm just gonna try. Then you will have more exposure and basically you will be open to more answers. So I think that really the goal, and something that I do often is I practice being curious and I check myself and I make sure that there are times where I'm not being held back by fear. So I don't think that ideas necessarily come from something, but I think that your general attitude about how you approach the world will generate those ideas. Yeah.
Thanks. I really loved seeing actually the brainstorming sessions because it's exciting. And I was wondering whether you attempted to pitch maybe more engagement of like the kids and the families in that process and have them be the designers with you, or if maybe that happened afterwards as they were interacting and engaging, and that was also an opportunity to spark their curiosity and creativity.
We wanted that to happen, and there were actually some scenes that we filmed with the kids. There was actually one scene that I filmed with all of those children that were homeschooled where you could see, I don't know, you probably didn't notice, but they all went and took out their chairs and they looked under their chairs. It's because we made their chairs together. Okay, so we had a whole scene where we had paint and everything, and we were all individualizing the chairs that they would have, and they didn't know what they were going to end up being. And that was really exciting. Those scenes, they didn't make it into the cut. But I think that's really an important part of it, and I think that it would enrich this show so much to be able to see that kind of thing. Yeah.
Hi, Jessica.
Hi.
It's a great opportunity to be here. I bumped into this conference. I'm traveling to attend a course at Harvard. I work for Coke in Latin America. I'm a designer. And it's just great to see all of your brilliant work. And I see there's a lot of an artistic soul on you, even though you're an engineer and you apply a lot of, let's say, forefront technology to your work. And I wonder, how do you deal with, for example, the business side, the corporate side of the world, where you have like tough deadlines on your shoulder, and the artistic side, sometimes it's just there's not enough room for it, and you have to deliver, and you have to overcome fears of failure. Sometimes you might fail, and your prototypes, they don't work in real life. So that kind of mindset, how do you deal with that? Those triggers that you need to overcome and think of the reality beyond the let's say the dream world that I connect to as well, being a fine artist and a designer.
Right. That's a great question. The top answer is that I'm my own boss. And so, I have different pressures, right? I can choose what the projects are. Where I run into the problem is that when to say something is done, right? Because it's like, well, there's, again, the unmade. There's so many versions that we can do. There's so many options. And I have so many ideas now that I've felt something or seen something, made it tangible. Now how do I say, okay, let's call this one a product, right? And so that was something I had to reconcile internally and with myself and the company, which was that often that it was just like, it doesn't mean, again, the other stuff isn't going to happen. It just means that right now we need to continue to be able to do the next product. And so if that's the case, how do I time it? What do I have to do to say I need to ship it now, and call this one final? When even I know it's still kind of a prototype in some ways. Yeah. I don't think I could work for corporate. I'm like not hireable, by the way, just so you know. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi. I think we may have overlapped at the AI lab briefly.
I think so, yeah.
What do you say to either young people or people who maybe didn't start like their journey, their like formal school, whatever journey, towards being an engineer or designer, and they say, so what should I do? What should I do to, if I want to become like you, I want to, I want to be an engineer or designer? How do I foster that, whether I'm young or just I haven't done it yet?
Right. So I think, first of all, it's hard to say I want to be something if you've never tried it, right? So then that's curious, right? I mean, of course, I wanted to be an astronaut when I was little, but I hadn't tried it, right? But I didn't really know, right? And so I think exposure is the only thing. Exposure, broad exposure, right? To like so many different things and so many different people doing different things is the only way to really get someone who's younger excited about anything, and to make them be curious, to foster that curiosity about everything. If there's like interest already shown in mechanical engineering or building something, then there are so many online things, different, all kinds of toys and games and things that you can use now to build things. But often when we were at the humanoid lab, people would come for tours, and sometimes parents would come in and say, how do I get my son or my daughter to come here? And I was like, you should definitely stop asking that. Like, that is not the question. If you want them to go anywhere, you ask them what they're wondering about. You show them all the things in the world that can be done. Show them what we do. But there's no way you're going to get them to come here, And that, make them excited, I guess.
What are some questions you find yourself returning to replenish your sense of curiosity when you might otherwise be depleted? And do you have some personal, whether there's spiritual practices or practices that you return to again and again to refill your cup?
So I do something called, I have a bunch. One thing I do, it's called Dare of the Day. So I dare myself to do something every day. I used to do it every day. Now, a couple times a week. And it helps me to remember, to realize what my engagement is with the world and to keep pinging, right? To keep understanding what it is. It could be, one important element of this Dare of the Day is I never write them down, because then it becomes something I've recorded, and that's not the purpose. The purpose is that I succeed each time only by doing the dare, even if it's a massive failure, right? Even if I, wear one shoe to work or two of that, whatever, or if I engage with someone on a subway, or if I do this, even if I have an awful outcome, I still won the dare. So to me, that constantly helps me stay vulnerable, which I think is really important. Another thing that I do, I know a lot of people have meditation practices and things like that. I don't, but I often have a lot of brain clutter. One thing that helps me when things get really loud is I ask myself, or I say to myself, I wonder what I'm going to think of next. And then everything gets quiet. And I don't know why that happens, but there must be some reason that the prediction algorithm of the brain gets overridden or something like that. But if you practice that, I just, if that ever happens to you, just ask, I wonder what I'll think about next. And then, there's silence for me. So that helps.
Fabian again. Speaking
I
about,
remember.
Yeah. Speaking about massive failures and what's next, is there a prototype or product that you can't sleep at night or keeps you up late that you want to possibly still do, and how do you go about that and move from there?
I'm very tired lately, so nothing really keeps me up that late. But there are a lot of chandeliers that I think about making, and often ones that, as they change and move, that they make, some reflection just come into view for a quick second and then leave. sort of like this fleeting moment where you can see it coming and you know it's going to happen and you feel like it, and then it's gone again, right? So maybe a face or some scene or something like that. So I think of a lot of chandeliers, and I happen to love lighting. I also invent a lot of other things now. So from jewelry to kitchen goods, which I think a lot about icing cakes these days, to be honest. So, and jewelry and games. I think it's more that, excuse me, it's more that there's like a massive, I'm gonna take water. I think it's just more that there's so many things, yeah, that keeps me going.
So we have time for just a few more questions.
Whenever you were done with a project on the show or off of the show, did you ever rethink your ideas?
Every single time. Yeah, that's a good question. And like I was saying, like nothing ever feels really finished to me. In fact, it just seems like I got more information about what it could be. And I think that's a wonderful, it can be wonderful unless you have a business and you have to then decide that that's the product. But constant reevaluation and constant excitement and sometimes it's you know, if you want to make something like work different, or if you want to make it look different, there are so many different ways that you can think about changing it. And I mean, the answer is just all the time rethinking about them. I love questions. I could do this all night, by the way.
Hi, I'm a current PhD student here. Do you have, if you could go back in time and talk to yourself when you were working on your grad degree here, any advice that you would give yourself?
I probably would have left sooner. There was a time when I realized that I wasn't being a good student anymore, and that I was interested in art. And I actually was doing a lot of media art at the time, and had met a fabulous group of friends that were also doing that. And I realized that I wanted, that was giving me joy more than actually what my thesis was. And I was somehow got really stuck on the PhD letters, and I forgot the me letters. And so yeah, I think I would have said, like, when you see that you should stop, that you should stop. I know that wasn't the most inspiring answer. I'm sorry that.
I'm Pauline. I'm a mechanical engineering at a small engineering school called Olin College. My question is, with the show, how much of there is collaboration with the families and the kids that you have? Because I know you kind of go in and interview them at the start, but are they involved in the whole process? Do they know kind of what it's going to look like before kind of the big reveal? Because it's kind of all about this collaborative design process and the people first, as my professor Ella over there has taught me. So how much of that do you see in the show versus in reality?
There is zero collaboration in the show except for those scenes where sometimes we would interact and they get cut. But otherwise, actually, the families aren't even allowed near their house when we're doing any of the renovations. They have to go stay somewhere else. If it was my house, and I'm sure that some of the families did this, I would totally go like at night and peek around, right? And I mean, of course, right? But we never saw them. Some of the families actually thought that the four of us, actually did sleep over there. You know, they're like, you were here this whole time and did it for us. And I was like, and the cameras are rolling, right? So there's one of the first episodes, and I didn't even know. I was getting used to the camera. I didn't know what we were allowed to say we did and didn't do. And so she came and she's like, I can't believe you stayed here and you did all this for us. And I looked at her and I went, no problem. And I was like, oh no, calculating in my head. She thinks we were sleeping here for like the last 4 weeks and that I just really built this, And so yeah, they weren't around at all, and they didn't know. And really, props to them, because they were like, do whatever you are going to do, and we're going to go with it. Granted, they were getting everything for free as well. But there was one family that gave us a little bit of a checklist afterwards and said that they didn't like certain things and wanted changes. And that was not collaboration, but that was an interesting effect of what happened. So yeah, there was really nothing. We did listen to their stories, though. That was important. Like, we listened to like what their problems were, and tried to solve their particular problems.
Hi, I'm Ganit. I have too many questions, but one of them is the process of you writing the love letter, and how the storytelling process for making the lecture.
I had this, like, what I thought was a really great idea to make this love letter to the Unmade, and it seemed grand, and then I also knew that I had to tell things that I had made, and so at some point in when I was writing the talk, the conceit started to hurt me, but I also, really, I started to also read a lot of love letters from Virginia Woolf to Vida, her lover, and for a while, I started to hear myself in that kind of language, and oh my gosh, it's so articulate and so eloquent, and I started even more while I was writing it and thinking about this unmade, which is like this cloud, right? Like really loving this thing as I was writing it and feeling love. And then I'm like, I can't say these things to an audience. Like, I'm so mushy and this is super cheesy. So I had to reel it back in. So actually it became a harder conceit for me, but it's something that, and not to, be too meta here, but like, this is definitely not done. Like, that letter feels completely unfinished and unmade still. But that's, yeah, it was an interesting process.
Maybe time for one last question over here.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Sam. I'm a product designer. I graduated from Olin a couple years ago, and I think I know a few people here from there. I was noticing the studio space, and I think you also mentioned how it affects you and how it maybe mirrors the way that you think. And I was curious what it was like to set that studio space up and how it affects your thought process or the process of the projects you work on.
There's a very good picture that would be important here. So I have my desk in the studio. We are in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and we look over the East River. I can see the Manhattan Bridge and the Williamsburg Bridge, and I can see kind of into Manhattan, and I see a ton of water. For me, it's very important to always have water in my periphery when I'm creating, because it reminds me that everything is connected. So setting up the space was really important where I was going to sit, and where I was going to, in moments when I need to take a break, be able to look outside and what that backdrop would be. So that was important. Napping, the area for napping, also very, very important. And also being able to kind of separate a clean space from the place where we build stuff and do dirty stuff, because again, as I was saying, I can get overstimulated by a lot of visual chaos. So having some space that felt a little bit cleaner and neater was important. So we have 2 floors, one where we build stuff and one where we kind of do the pixel pushing. Another thing I do actually, and this goes to some of the practices I have, there's a company called Demeter Fragrance, and they have fragrance libraries, and they make these smells in bottles, okay? And like some of them are very arbitrary, like rain, and some are more concrete, like junior mints or lemon meringue pie, things like this. And I realized this when I was at MIT, that the smells really helped me context switch. So and now I have 160 of these smells, and I have them all in order, so they range from very earthy, like beetroot and dirt and tomato, to all the way to like very, very fruity, and to margarita, the watery ones. And each kind of grouping helps me to context switch. So the kind of earthy ones are for engineering, when some of the fruitier ones are for creative thinking, and some other ones help me to strategize. And so that was important for me to be able to have those all close at hand as well. And so they're in the studio. I can find a picture for you if you need, if you want to see it too.
Amazing. Well, we're just so lucky to be able to learn from you, and maybe someday we could get a copy of your unmade letter to the Unmade, and we could get it out there for the world. But please join me in thanking the amazing Jess Banks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think you're able to stick around for a few minutes if anyone wants to meet her. And also, we have a reception on either side, so there's food and beverages, and we have a little party prize. If you check under your chair and there's a sticker on it, you can get a gift from a Mad tote bag from the front desk. So double check the bottom side of your chair, and thank you all so much.